Today I would like to talk to you about someone famous. He may not have appeared on television or had his face in magazines or followers on Twitter, but he certainly was a celebrity here in Noble Township, although I'm sure he wouldn't have cared too much for being referred to as a celebrity. I would like to share with you about a man whose wisdom, work ethic, and attitude on life have inspired and amazed many people, including me. The name Alfred Reed immediately makes me think of storytelling. When I was little, my dad would go down the road to the elderly neighbor's house from time to time, and sometimes he would ask me to go along for the visit with Alfred. I have to admit, looking back on my younger years, that I wasn't always thrilled about these visits. A visit with Alfred usually ended up lasting several hours, most of this time spent listening to story after story from his life experiences. I guess I didn't think I had time for this when I was little. After all, I had cars to play with and pictures to draw. I would get bored and restless. Eventually, though, after I grew a little older and more mature, I began to understand the value that my dad saw in those stories of Alfred's. I grew to appreciate his wisdom, and I was fascinated by all the things he had done and seen in his lifetime. Alfred had accumulated 90 years' worth of memories, and he had done and been through and seen everything, it seemed. The Depression, wars, droughts, floods, world events, and local happenings. He had been there for it all, and now he was like a human history book, ready to share all the knowledge he could. Not only had Alfred's 90 years of incredible experiences given him plenty of stories to tell, but he had also had the opportunity to gain a vast knowledge on just about anything you could ask him about. He had a very logical way of thinking, and he was also very mechanically minded. Put simply, he just knew how things worked. He could take things apart and reassemble them perfectly, usually in better shape than they started. His knowledge wasn't limited to a simple understanding, though. One of Alfred's greatest talents was creative problem solving. He could always come up with an original, inventive solution to any challenge that was presented to him. If someone in the neighborhood had something they just couldn't fix, they could generally always ask Alfred for help, and he would get everything back in order. There was no puzzle too complex, no riddle too cryptic for the resourceful mind of Alfred Reed. The talent of creative problem solving combined with an incredible work ethic meant Alfred was hardly ever sitting still. At every visit, he could always show you the project he was working on. A large portion of his effort was put into maintaining his property, which always appeared to be meticulously cared for. The buildings were always properly maintained and kept clean inside and out, the trees were always trimmed and kept healthy, and the flowers were always full and free of weeds. Sometimes the grass in the yard would grow noticeably tall, but for a good reason. After mowing the grass, Alfred would break up all the clippings and use them as mulch for the biggest vegetable garden I had ever seen. Even on the hottest days when most of us would rather stay inside, Alfred could be seen working out in his garden, caring for the plants and never letting a weed take root. If there was a job to be done, Alfred would waste no time in getting started, and he never gave any task less than his full ability. Alfred's ingenuity helped him not only to solve existing problems, but also design and build new creations that simplified everyday tasks, improved the quality of his work, or enhanced his and countless others' enjoyment of life. Alfred had a huge basement and 2 large barns, each serving as workspace for different kinds of fixing and building. Many of his creations were actually used within these workshops. Numerous templates, ingenious gadgets, and handmade tools lay in the neatly labeled bins and shelves on the walls, among his extraordinary collection of antique tools, most of which were still used as intended the day they were made. Even the bins and shelves were mostly assembled by Alfred himself, sometimes from crates, old cabinets, and anything that he could recycle and repurpose. Most widely known in the community and beyond, though, were Alfred's projects, like whirligigs, brooms, knives, wooden boxes, and many others. These items found their way into the homes of probably just about everyone who knew Alfred. In my house, there was never a broom used that wasn't made by Alfred from the broom corn that he grew himself. If you live here in Noble Township, chances are you either have or know someone who has a whirligig like this one displayed in the yard. In fact, these whirligigs have found their way across the world, being requested by team members at Indiana Downs and carried back to the racers' home countries. Alfred was an incredible craftsman and humble too. He never boasted about his perfect craftsmanship, and he didn't build all these things to get rich. He sold the things he made for next to nothing, or often just gave them away to friends and neighbors, just for the satisfaction of making something with his own hands and helping out a friend. Everyone who came to know Alfred in his 90 years of life was sure to learn something from him. Whether it was a lesson on the history and workings of an antique tool, or a story from his experiences, or an explanation of how his creations were assembled, he always had wisdom to share. Sometimes, though, the lessons were unspoken. Alfred led by example, being kind to his fellow man, doing for others, and never sitting still while life passed him by. I had an incredible admiration for the mind and the heart of Alfred Reed, and it is these qualities that have made his name known by the entire community.